To record this episode just in case we want it. All right, it says we're live. So let me check out Facebook real fast. Bum, bum, bum. There's my notification.
Awesome.
All right, we are good to go. All right, guys, welcome. I am so excited about this conversation in consciousness. This has been something that I have been wanting to do for like a month now, and life has just been kind of a bee about it. So usually when that happens, it's a good sign that we're going to get into some juicy topics and really get things going. My Facebook isn't wanting to show me comments, so let me go here real fast. Maybe. There we go. All right. Mute that. Okay, I can see things. So if you're here, drop a comment, say hi. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. Annie, you want to introduce yourself to the community?
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for putting this together, Tiffany, and for inviting me. So hi, everyone. My name is Annie. I'm a decodes practitioner. So that's, energy healing for those who might not know. I'm also, I guess I could call myself an astrologer in training now. And I'm a mom of two. I have a 7-year-old and soon to be 5-year-old. And so, yeah, I'm really passionate about kind of mixing all those things together. I think that astrology gives us so many insights into, who we are, how we process things. And for me, it's given me a lot of self-awareness, helped me find a lot of self-compassion. And now I'm translating that over to my kids and kind of seeing, what can we clean up, because astrology will tell you all the things. It'll tell you past life stuff, what's your biggest challenge in this life. So combining it with energy work, I think it can be really powerful to, expedite those karmic lessons and things like that. So.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am a strong believer on energy work with kids. I mean, Rhea has been such an example for me to just know how potent kids are when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I feel like as they get older, society conditions us to stop believing in the magic and to stop believing in our own abilities and the things that we just naturally can do. And having her in a situation to where she can actually be supported to do what she does best, she just runs with it and she does it so gracefully. And it's like, man, why can't I do that? Like, I want to be that person. I want to be that healer. But there's so much distortion at my age that I'm having to unwind and dismantle to get back to that childlike innocence and belief and magic and what we do here in this world. And so I've never been very good at astrology. I can't even tell you my own astrology signs. I just know I'm an Aquarius, and Ray is a Capricorn, and I don't even know what Xavier and the twins are, but I love the idea around it. And I love, I did the thing with Colby about his class and like understanding how to read your chart and how much it can tell you. And I've seen it work. It's just not my forte. So that's why I wanted to do this conversation with you, because I feel like, as you mentioned, the healing aspect of it and adding that astrology side to it is just really the perfect manual for us parents.
Yeah, exactly. I always laugh when people say like parenting doesn't come with a manual, because I'm like, actually, like it kind of does, because it can tell us so many things. So yeah, to give you an overview, and I'm really excited because we'll talk about your twins and kind of giving everyone a real life example, but to give an overview of sort of what an astrology chart can tell us, with our sun sign, it tells you sort of like that soul essence, what's your, your ego, your drive and things like that. Your moon sign will show you your inner workings, your feelings, how you process those things. The rising sign is the lens through which you can see the world, which, as you can imagine, gives us a lot of clues in terms of our behaviors, because, fortunately, unfortunately, like our behaviors all go through that filter first of our perceptions. And that's really what the rising sign is our perceptions. Your Venus is how you love and how you want to receive love. Mars is that drive, that passion for life. And then we have some of the more like general planets, which is also really interesting because, for example, Pluto is a generational planet. So you and I we're only 1 year apart. So we both have Pluto and Scorpio. And it's kind of that, like, you know, they're like, oh, the millennials, like all millennials are this. Well, that's because Pluto in Scorpio is that generation. Like, we're just like, no, this doesn't work. Like, I hear you that it's been done like this for decades, but I'm just not having it. And that's Pluto and Scorpio, like to a T.
Pluto's
So
my
there's so many
jam. I've
pieces.
always been pro Pluto. I was so heartbroken when they took Pluto out of the. I'm like, no.
Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah. So yeah, it just gives us so many different insights, you know, and I think it's really interesting for, you know, like someone like you and I, when we have multiple children, to kind of see those similarities as well, and things that are things that are different, because then that's it, you can explain it. You know, sometimes people might have a harder time understanding, like, how can my kids be so different when they have the exact same environment and same upbringing? Well, it's probably part of astrology. But something that's really interesting that we'll talk about with your twins is that twins who are born less than 3 minutes apart have the exact same astrology chart. And
But they had completely opposite personalities.
yeah, so that's what I was going to say. So it's really interesting to see how, because basically every single astrology sign has kind of like, you know, like a highest expression of really like an evolved, you know, Aquarius, like you would say, and then the lower expression, which someone has like, you know, a little bit more growth to do and stuff. So there's that full spectrum, even though it's the same sign. So I think it'll be really interesting for you when we talk about these things to talk about how they have the kind of the same blueprint, but they express it really differently, you know. And then it's really interesting as they grow, and you'll be able to watch how the external influences really play at that, you know, their different friends, and if they have, you know, any marking moments, you know, with like friendships and breakups and things like that, like those will have a lot more impact, you know.
Oh yeah, they're 18 months and they've already got like complete polar opposite personalities. They already have their favorites in the house. They already have like, this is what they like, this is what they don't like. One's more into being vocal and like expressive, and the other one's like, I'm just gonna plow you over, get what I want, and do whatever I have to make it happen. Like, they're completely opposite. But like you said, they're literally, I think, like a minute apart. And so it's interesting to see, and they even look different. They don't look the same, which they, you know, they had their own sacks and everything. They weren't in the same sack or anything like that, but you can definitely tell them apart so easily. And Lyra has 2 birthmarks, whereas Talia has none. And it's like, so they have like all these different interesting characteristics. Talia had a head full of hair. Lyra was bald until recently. Like, they're so different. It's so amazing to see. So I'm so curious to see what their chart says, because as me working with them energetically, it's just been really fascinating to see how different they are and how different each of their needs are. All for my kids in general. Like, Rhea wants to be hands-on. She wants you to hold her. She wants you to help her. She wants you to navigate with her. My son, don't touch me. Let me process my stuff. And when I'm ready, I will come to you. And he gets so upset so easily. Like, he's the easiest person to break his heart. He'll tell you, he'd be like, you broke me. And then he'll go off and he'll like be upset. And then he'll come back and be like, can we talk about this?
I love it.
And then the twins, they aren't talking very much, but man, they are so projective as far as like what they want, and they know how to get it. And it's so fascinating to see how that goes.
Yes. Okay, well, let's dive in. I'm not surprised that you're saying that because of their moon sign. So let's start with their moon sign. So I mentioned that a little bit before. So basically, your moon is all of that inner world. So it's your feelings, your instinct, how you nurture. It's the family. The moon also represents their mother, you know, habits. It's that emotional landscape and kind of like your soul. And so your daughters are Aries moons. So I actually like to use cards because they give like a really, you know, visual kind of explanation. So this is the Aries sort of archetype, and
Nice.
it's
Like
very, yeah. So Aries is very assertive. It's a fire sign. It's the first fire sign. It's the first sign of the zodiac. So it's a, you know, go-getter. It's like on a mission. It can be bossy. So I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, you're kind of probably like trying to make sense of it because their sun sign is Pisces, which is completely opposite. So your twins are Pisces, and Pisces is a water sign. So it's very emotional, very intuitive, very, very psychic, especially that they both have this, their sun in the 12th house. And in astrology, the 12th house represents your subconscious and really like the underworld. So all of that, you know, psychic stuff. So they have the intuitive sign, Pisces archetype, in that 12th house. So they're very in tune, very, very psychic, very dreamy and idealistic. But that's it. And here I can show you the picture. It's like very different, you know, the archetype compared to Aries, if I like put them side by side, you know? So
Yes.
yeah. So it's super interesting. So that's it. Basically, it's like what you're, you know, describing of kind of like getting what you want and making yourself heard. That Aries moon definitely plays a lot into what most people would think of as like a typical Pisces, you know, that can be a lot softer and just kind of go with the flow of life and being really like dreamy.
Yep. I love that. And then it reflects on the personality. And I can see some of that in Rhea's chart too, which I know you didn't do her chart, but I like, so she's my 111 baby in
Yeah.
January. So she's Capricorn and she's like very magical herself. And so it's like, as you're talking about all these different things, I'm like, ooh, I can see that dynamic also. So it's like all the girls are super magical. And it's like, then the boys are like the recluse, don't talk to me, don't touch me kind of thing. Because my husband's the same way. He's very recluse. He's a Leo, and so like he's very. I want to stay home and be a hermit, and I want to like not have to go socialize. Like this has been the best 2 years of his life. He's like, I can work from home and I don't have to talk to humans. It's amazing. And I'm like, I need humans.
Yeah.
Tell me
That's,
my humans.
yeah.
So I would love to hear, since jumping into astrology, especially as a decoder, because you know we have all these amazing tools that we stack on top of each other. How have you seen you shift as a person, being able to understand this and really work with your clients? Like, do you just happen to like say, "Hey, can I grab your chart before a session?" And that way I can really understand the best way to support you, or do you just automatically naturally pick it up based off of their personalities?
Well, so I've started including it in sessions more if people are open to it, of saying, hey, can I have, you know, look at your chart? And it's kind of like a screening board. I think that it's really nice for people who might have a bit of a harder time kind of like knowing their stuff, you know, and some people aren't as like aware and things like that. It's a really good springing board to look and say like, oh, hey, for example, let's talk about your example. So I looked up your chart as a mom, and so you have Chiron in the 4th house, and Chiron is basically your biggest wound. Okay, so it's a little key symbol on our chart, and it's really because it's the biggest wound, and it allows you a key to help other people. So if you're able to work through your lessons, it's a way that you can help other people in this life. And so your biggest wound with Chiron being in the 4th house is parents, caregivers, and home. So for me, that would tell me, I would wonder, like, I would, you know, ask types of questions of like, okay, well, you know, what was life like growing up? Like, did you have a hard time with, you know, your caregivers and your parents and your home life? Did you feel very nurtured and, you know, supported and things like that? Because the Chiron there would tell me that there's something related probably to childhood and home life that was, you know, challenging, very like uneasy to learn the lessons so that then you can help other people.
Yeah. So ironically, you know, it's interesting because I actually had a really good childhood. My parents were really supportive as far as, you know, making sure we had everything we needed. They were very loving. My parents are still married to this day, like really, really good. But my struggle was my mom was raised in a really strong Southern Baptist church who raised us in a really strong Southern Baptist church. And so we had those, I wouldn't want to say conditionings, but conditionings of having that religious background of, you know, there's a right and a wrong. And if you do wrong, then you're basically going to hell. And if you do right, then everything's good. But for me, my questioning wanted to go beyond just the church. And so I didn't have that support and being able to say, you know, it just seems so interesting that we just put all of our blind trust in this one thing and we don't question anything else. And so as I got old, because I was the lead singer in our praise band. Like I was doing, if I wasn't at school, I was at church. Like I was really, really strong in our church family. And it wasn't until I got into high school and I really started getting that opportunity of making my own decisions, I was like, something's different. There's something more here. But I wasn't allowed to really question it. I didn't have anywhere to go for that. And as you said, I'm that person. I like to disrupt things. Like I like to have my children make the choice if they want to go to church or not. And I have nothing against the church. I still believe in my beliefs, but I also believe beyond my beliefs of what I was raised when I was growing up. And so I want my children to be able to make their own choices on if that's something that they want to do or run with their own magic. And so I don't have that you have to choose where I had to choose. I really didn't have a choice. Not until after I got out of my parents' home. And then I just kind of went on that spiral of I didn't get to do anything as a kid, so I'm going to do it all, basically screw up my life just so I can say I've had the experience and then go from there. And so yeah, it's not your typical like struggle, but at the same time, it was definitely very sheltered almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a perfect example of really how, sometimes I think one of the downfalls of astrology can be that people will turn to it for very specific answers and kind of that predictive astrology of like what's going to happen in the future. But there's just so many different aspects, and it's really to look at it as a theme. So that's a really perfect example that I was saying to you, okay, it's in your fourth house. There's something going on in your home that was challenging or restrictive. And that's it. You gave like a really great example that no, it's not the typical, like I had a bad upbringing and my parents weren't there, but that's it. It was that very restrictive. It can't make a choice. This is what it is. That's the only way to do things. And then, like you said, you got out of your house and then the repercussions of that kind of all like trickle down, right? And so that's funny because that's what I had written down that really, I think one of the things for you in terms of really embracing that Chiron and using those insights to your parenting is how you've already mentioned it, that you want to give your children more choices, you want to support them, you want their home to feel supportive and expansive and not so like a box, which I think is really important, especially for your Pisces children who are very dreamy, who are very they can be idealistic. And I think I know like for myself, so I have it's a little bit advanced, but I have this one specific placement in my chart that makes me be very dreamy, and I'm a Sagittarius rising. So I can get that idealistic. And I always get told like, you like, that's not realistic, Annie, that's not realistic. And that's like so soul crushing. And so that's something that you want to be really conscious of for your children. Them having such strong Pisces placement is really to foster that they will be idealistic. They will have lots of really grand ideas that other people might not be able to see. But if we know anything about manifestation, it's that if you believe it, then it can happen, even though other people don't believe it. And that's when we block our own manifestations, and when we let other people get into our heads and say, that's not realistic enough. You need to be more realistic.
Oh yeah. And like, so that's one of the big things that I teach my not teach, but I coach my moms and warrior mama is, the first thing that we look at is we look at all of those fear beliefs that we still have running, that we still believe in, because a lot of people, like society runs us off of fear. Like everything's fear-based. And so when we go past those fears and we start looking at the possibilities, I have an entire week that we literally are dreamers, where we have our heads up in the clouds, where we're being that archetype. And it's like, if you wanted to dream up your perfect life of whatever that looks like for you right here and right now, what is that? How can you be in that moment? How can you make that happen? And that's the week that everybody's just like, oh, because we do talk about the whole mind over matter thing. Like your mindset matters so much. If you're telling yourself, this is what's going to happen, or you stay in that fear concept of, if I don't do something, like I left my full-time job to do my part-time hobby as a full-time gig. And the biggest thing that held me back from doing it for so long was the fear of not having that set income. And I'm doing better now doing this than what I've ever done behind any desk, like ever. And it's the same thing with our kids. Rhea is a powerful manifester. That kid can find money And I don't even know how because we don't carry cash around our house. And she comes and she's like, look, I found $5. And she'll put it in her piggy bank. And it's like, where the heck did you get $5 from? But she wanted to start her own business. 6.5 years old. That girl has made more money this month than I can even have thought of possibly doing. All the money that I put into getting her products for her business, she's already doubled. And so
Amazing.
it's like she is so good at what she does. And she just had a passion and she wanted to play with it some more. And she's like, I already got my Christmas list for Santa because I don't know if you've ever seen, it's called Claus, Klaus on Netflix. It's
No.
it's amazing. It's a great concept for kiddos and trying to understand like the concept of Santa and how all of that works. And she goes, I already got my letter ready. Like, here we go. Here, like, and it's all just product. So she can keep growing her business. And I'm like, girl, like, how you doing? Um, she wanted one of those rainbow ribbon dancer things because she's seen one at dance class. And I was like, well, mommy just got a bunch of stuff for you for your business. Let's wait a minute. We'll see what we can do afterwards. You can make the money, and then whatever you do with your money, you can go and buy one. She got one for Halloween trick-or-treating. She went to some random person's house trick-or-treating. They had a bunch of toys, and it had the exact ribbon that she wanted right there. And she got it for free while she was trick-or-treating. And I'm like, how? And she's like, I don't know. She goes, but look what I got, Mom. I can save my money. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I'm like not even one bit surprised that you're saying that. My husband is a Capricorn, and yeah, he's like, I always say like everything he touches turns to gold. It's just like the way it is. And the Capricorn archetype is a sea goat. So it's like
Yeah.
half goat, half kind of like mermaid. And
Yep.
when people joke about making money and things like that, they're like, oh, you're such a goat. Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
a saying, a slang thing. And yeah, it's just so perfect. So
It's so
I'm not
perfect.
surprised at all.
So I want to talk about, you talked about the whole being able to support your kid consciously, which is a big reason why we're having this conversation. And I would love to hear from your aspect, jumping into all of this holisticness, jumping into decodes and astrology. How has that changed your parenting tactics? How has that changed your parenting style?
Mhm. It's honestly allowed me to just see my stuff a lot more quickly and clearly. Like I know it's probably annoying for people listening, but when we think, our kids, like it's hard and like they're really triggering me or all that stuff, like it's 98% of the time it's not them, it's us, right? It's us as a parent that some resonance is getting hit, some childhood memory or whatever. And so when I use these different modalities in terms of like astrology and human sign and things like that, it's really that awareness, like I was saying before. So for me, like I have a very full first house. I have a lot of planets there and a lot of sort of challenging aspects. And your first house in astrology is your identity. It's how you like see yourself. It's a lot of that inner worth stuff. And so for me, I always, one of the things that I really kind of struggle with is when my kids are having a hard time, or they're kind of being angry or say like mean, or they're not having a good time at school or whatever. I make it mean something about myself, and that I know is just how I am because of all of that first house stuff. A big part of my incarnation in this life is really that self-love and self-worth. So I'm very aware of that now, so I can kind of do the like 10-minute timer thing, of like feel the feels and all the things, and oh my god, I feel like such a terrible parent, blah blah blah. But then it's like I don't sit there and wallow because I know that's what a lot of this incarnation is about for me. So that's really what I love about understanding yourself so much better with these different modalities. Like I was always the type of person, I did all the personality tests and quizzes and things like that, and in business and all of that. So that's what I really like about astrology. It really kind of helps me reel in that mindset, and that's how it helps me be like a better parent, just to have better control over my mindset and staying positive, not making it mean more about me than really just like it's an isolated incident.
Right. Well, and I think I'm speaking out of my own personal experience. I really do think that's the hardest part about all of this. And, our partners, I don't know how your partner is, as far as like being supportive with the whole metaphysical, energetic, like all of the things. My husband doesn't exactly understand it. He knows it works, But then whenever I'm trying to apply these things in our house, because I don't force anything on him, I don't say, hey, I'm going through this, do it with me. I'll go through like a money magic class because I can manifest stuff rather quickly myself. I think, I mean, this hut is pretty rather amazing.
It
And
is.
he's like, he still lives in that mindset of paycheck to paycheck, like having everything, like we still have enough for stuff, but things get tight. And then he starts stressing, and it's like, you should watch Money Magic. You should watch this. You should listen to this podcast. You should do it. And he just looks at me. He goes, no. And I'm like, well, then don't complain to me that you're not happy about your situation if you're not going to do anything about it. And he's just like, stop doing your voodoo on me. And I'm like, it's not voodoo. It works.
That's so funny.
But it's the same thing with this parenting concept. If we choose for our internal selves to step into this mindset of being a more conscious parent and supporting our children with all possibilities and going with their life choices, their charts, their personalities, then we can't expect everybody to just be on board with it. And so that's something that is really strong in my field of really trying to learn how to navigate that, because my parenting and how I approach parenting and how my husband approaches parenting are slightly different. And there's certain things that he hasn't quite grasped as far as like the whole trigger thing. And then I'm like, babe, okay, it's like, just calm down, take some breaths, let's talk about this. And he's like, no, why? They're like, and I'm like, okay, hold on, talk to me, like, what's going on? And he's like, why are you coaching me right now? He's like, they're in trouble. I'm like, they're not really in trouble. Like, I don't understand why you're getting so upset over our daughter wanting to use our bathroom versus hers. Like, what's the real reason you're getting so upset right now? And he's like, I'm not talking to you about this. I'm like, okay, well, at least like, don't take it out on the kid. And he's like, I just don't get it. He goes, I thought we were on the same page. I'm like, I never knew we had an issue with our kids using our bathroom. I'm like, what's going on? Like, talk to me. So it's interesting because you're having to navigate your partner and your family, because the family are not going to parent the same way. And my parents were more strict growing older. You had to work for the stuff that you wanted. You had to have good grades in order to keep your car. You had to, have a job to pay you to go to the movies or get gas or like do all the things. And we're opposite. They're like, oh, you want this? Well, how can we energy exchange? What if you clean up your room? What if you helped do stuff for mommy or helped do stuff for daddy? And so it's like we're still teaching them money mindset, but in a way that's not like you have to work for, what you earn kind of thing, And so it's really interesting to see how the different dynamics play. And I do see it as far as like generational, like each generation's different. And so, coming from that aspect of bringing it into your family, bringing this choice into your household, how has that gone? Has it gone pretty smooth, or have you noticed some resistance?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to you. Like there's more resistance from my partner than there is my kids, because it's kind of like we were saying at the beginning, like kids are still that blank slate, they haven't been conditioned to step away from all of the magic and the belief and the things like that. So for them, it's easier. I try to, just drop little things. We talk about souls and reincarnation and, karmic choices and things like that. And, it's funny because like a few weeks ago, my son was like, Mommy, like, why do people come here? Like, why do they come on earth? And I'm having this whole conversation about reincarnation and how there are souls at this time that it came to make the world better. And he's like, uh-huh. And I just see like my husband, who's kind of overhearing in his face, he's like, at the computer,
Oh my gosh. Yes. My daughter was asking my husband about heaven and why people pass away and go back to the stars. And it's like, okay, because we say like, there's heaven and then there's the stars and like all the things, like, because when they were younger, they didn't understand heaven. Like heaven wasn't like, what's heaven? But if you tell them, hey, they went back to the stars, because I talk to my kids about how we're made of stardust and how we're magical and like all of the things. And we have like this universal energy we can connect to. And so when they were younger, it was so much easier to say when somebody passes or they choose to no longer be here on earth, they go up to the stars. Well, now that Rhea's getting older, she's been going to church a few times with my mom and my grandma. And so she asked her dad the other day, she goes, how's heaven work? And he looked at me and he goes, you got this one.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm out. He's like, I'm out. He's like, I don't know how to explain that one to her. And I'm like, okay, well, Rhea, here, and we sat down. We actually had a really good conversation about it. And then she's like, so if we choose to leave Earth and we go back to the stars and we're not happy in the stars, we can come back to Earth, but as like a cat. And I go, if you want to. And she goes, I like being a cat. They sleep a lot. Like,
That's so funny.
yeah, you can come back as a cat. She goes, can I come back as a mermaid? And I'm like, you do you, boo. Like, if that's what you want to do, like, you do you. And she's just like, oh, this is interesting. So she's like, her little wheels are just turning in her head. And so it's interesting that your kid had a very similar like
Yeah.
experience with like the whole reincarnation. It's like how do they know this stuff at this age? But
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
found that and one thing too that we struggled with, Rhea, was she likes to be friends with everything. Everything. And there for a while she was actually there were some not so nice collectives that were trying to push into her presence, and she's like, Mom, I don't like it. And I was like, okay, here's what we do. Your room's safe, our home's safe. They can't come in without your permission. Tell them to go off. And I have like this little spray for them. And I think that was one of the hardest conversations to have with my kid, is because there are energies and forces out there that aren't here to support us. And
Yeah.
having that conversation of like, you are magical and you can create and you can be, but also know that if you're not comfortable with something, don't allow it to keep coming around. And so having that conversation with your kiddos is really interesting to have at a young age. But I also feel like it's the same, teaching them their own discernment with adults who are here. Like, if you don't feel comfortable with that adult, then go with an adult that you do feel comfortable with, or let somebody else know, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this person. Can you stay with me? Or can you call my mommy? Or, like whatever. And so finding that almost neutral zone, I guess, and like supporting them and being able to hold that container and growing with your kids, because as you mentioned, they are mirrors for us. We also kind of have to pay attention and making sure that they understand like the whole entire duality field with it. And so I guess as a mom, have you had to experience that yet? Or have you found any really good method to teach your little one? Because I think you said they were what, 2?
5 and 7.
5 and 7. So they are older.
Yeah, they are. We had a very like specific like situation that really kind of stuck him. My son still talks about it now. So he was about 3 at the time. And so this was almost like, 4 or 5 years ago. So I wasn't into all of this work as much yet. I had kind of started a little bit, but it definitely didn't know all about like energy attachments and, like nefarious collectives and things like that. And so it was a time in his life where he was waking up a lot at night, and he was having a lot of like night terrors, and he was really scared. And his daughter, not his daughter, his sister, my daughter, she was just born. And so I was super sleep deprived. And I remember just not handling it well at the time at all. Just being like, just go back to bed, like, just get over it. Like, it's fine. And then later, like a couple of years later, when I finally figured it out, and I do remember him talking about someone in the closet, and I would show him, I was like, there's no one there. Like, there's nothing there. Like, what do you know? And now we've talked about it, in retrospect, when I had more, awareness, and we're like, okay, yeah, like there are shadow people, and that's what he was seeing. It was shadow people. And it's like, can be very scary when you're that age and you don't know that that's it. You can just tell them like, stay out of my field, So about a year ago, when I was very much into this work and started kind of learning, I like brought it up again. And I was like, remember when this happened? He was like, yes. And I was telling you there was someone in the closet and you didn't believe me. And I was like, oh God, my heart, like I was just crushed, But yeah, I made sure to kind of go back on the situation and tell him like, I didn't know then, but now I do know, I do believe you. And I said, that's it. If there's ever that type of situation, just tell them I see you, you're not welcome here, like get out. So yeah, he still remembers that. So we kind of touch on it a little bit of terms of, like good, like versus bad, of like the world, and I still try to keep them a little bit sheltered because they're still young. So I do think that they don't need to know all the like horrors of the world.
Right. But they need to know a little bit of it, because if they do get in those situations, because Rayos was the same way. When hers started interfering with her field, it was the nightmares. And my son has nightmares as well. And so it's like, Why kids and why nightmares? I have no idea, but it's definitely something that, like, if you're going to allow this in your field, you have to, and like adults too. It's like, if you don't know discernment, like that's the first thing I'm coaching my clients. I'm like, dude, discernment, like you gotta do this, because that's the like saving grace of
Yeah.
all of this, is trusting your instincts, trusting your gut, knowing when something feels off and how to approach that. And so I think as a parent, really allowing my kids to be open to this, I think was so huge in my process of like, okay, how can I teach them how to navigate this in a way that's not going to scare them, but keep them in the knowing enough that if something does feel off, they can say, no, like this isn't happening, or let me know so I can step in and be like, okay, here we go.
Mhm.
This isn't happening, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love that you went back on that with your son and it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and I'm so sorry for that. Here's what we can look at going forward. Because admitting our own mistakes to our kids is such a huge opportunity for growth, not only for ourselves, but also for our kids to know that, hey, mommy and daddy aren't always perfect, but you know what? That's okay. I still love them. So then they can see that I don't have to be perfect. And you know, mommy and daddy still going to love me the same way if I'm not that perfect child. Because so often I think that expectations on a child's mind of wanting to meet those expectations and do good and, you know, get this, like, not like the congratulations, but they want to make us proud. And so um for me, it's like being vulnerable with your kids and saying, you know what, I'm not always perfect, I make mistakes, and that's okay. Here's how we learn from those. I think is really vital to their own growth, because then instead of it seeing it as a bad thing, they can see it as a growth opportunity. So
Yeah,
I
I
love that
totally
you do
agree.
that with your kids.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very important for me in terms of, conscious parenting, because that was something that I didn't have growing up. There was never any accountability. And in my family, like my whole extended family, you would just have like an argument or just kind of like a sucky moment. And then it would just like, as if it did never happened, and just like pretend it was all good, And that
Right?
used to always make me like question, and it would make me feel like a bit crazy. It's like, did I like dream this? Did I overreact this? Like, am I making a bigger thing? So that's
Yep.
something that's really important for me. But I
Yeah.
wanted to add to, what you were saying about like teaching our kids and, with clients discernment and stuff. I think that when we teach these things very young, we give them sort of an advantage compared to later, because what I find is that adults oftentimes who are new to this world and come and they're looking for healers, they are looking for that savior, right? Like they're at that very end of the rope, like rock bottom, and they're like desperate, right? They want help. They're like, help me, fix me, save me. And it's that energy of putting that onto someone else, right? And looking for that external savior and holder. But if we teach our kids all of this like from a very young age, and we teach them how they have their own intuition, and they have all that within them, it's a completely different energy of, hey, this is within me too. I'm not looking externally to someone else to do all of these things for me.
Right? Exactly. And you know, same thing with like the whole being able to navigate emotions, being able to identify emotions. Are they even ours, or are they something
Yeah.
that we picked up from somebody else? Like all of these things are such foundational tools, but as our own adults, as healers, looking for that like that healing person or that moment or that shift, those are the tools that we're using with as adults. And so if we can teach that to our kids at such a young age, they've already got the advantage, like you
Yeah.
said. So when they go to school and they're dealing with all of these bullies or overstimulations or stress or whatever it is, they can actually navigate and process that on their own terms internally, as if by magic, so that they can move forward in a more supportive and stable conscious approach. And I think that's a huge thing that, you know, the schools these days are trying to implement but aren't quite there yet. But really getting kids to identify their emotions, how to navigate around them, I think is really, really key. Because if our kids don't understand these emotions that they're going through, and we have no way of explaining to them, hey, this is what's going on, here's what you can do, then we're just setting them up to fail. And I think that's the hardest thing as a parent is I don't want to see my kids fail. I want to see them succeed. So if I can teach them these huge tools that I'm using as adults at an early age, then the possibilities of them moving forward with like a clean slate, no distortions, no karmic loops or ties, like how amazing are their futures going to be based off of the choices that they make, not what's been thrown at them because of us.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. I think like that's what I find is so hard as for, I know a lot of moms experience the, like awakening because of motherhood, you know, because you start kind of looking more like what's in this, what am I feeding my kid, what am I using all the products? Like that's how it kind of started for me. And a big part of that journey was really just like unconditioning, deconditioning myself to all of the projections that had been put onto me, all of the fears that had been put onto me. So it's definitely like a big aspiration of mine that my kids have a lot less cleanup to do, that they can really be themselves as themselves, you know,
Right.
not that's it, as who they should be, is who made them fit into this little like box or hole, you know?
Right. And it's not to say that they still won't have lessons, they still won't have things that they have to go through on their own, but it's preventing them from having the extra baggage that comes with
Exactly.
things. It gets them the opportunity to go through it without a distorted field because we've got so much junk that we're passing down energetically, which, you know, is a big reason why I love working with moms so much, because if we can clean up our own stuff, it just makes it so
Yeah.
much easier on our kids as they go through this crazy world and
Mhm.
all the stuff that they have to go through on their own.
Yeah.
All right, Annie, we have been at this for about 45 minutes. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap up? This has been such a great conversation. I love chatting with you. I love connecting with other moms and having like really wholesome, conscious conversations, especially when it comes to supporting our kids. But yeah, is there anything you want to share? How can people connect to you if they want to get their own children's charts read? Because that is amazing. I think that's amazing. And you're a decoder, so you have the healing as well. You're like a beautiful combo that you've got going for yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really important because I find that when for myself and I've seen in clients as well, it's kind of like what I call that awareness overwhelm. When you start kind of seeing all your stuff and seeing like, oh, how this happened in my childhood or that trauma, and it kind of all comes to light. And you're like, great, I can see it all. I can see how I'm passing it on to my kids, but what the heck do I do with it now? And it can be such a heavy weight, you know? So I really like to alleviate that awareness overwhelm of like, okay, here's it all. Let's do some energetic cleanup. Like, how do we fix it? So yeah, thank you for that. So if people want to connect with me, I'm on Instagram. It's astrology _ Annie. And my website is anniebertrand.com. So yeah, really, really love that. Find me there. I mean, I'm, you know, sharing content about, that's it, like how all the different signs, how can we support our kids, what lessons are they teaching us, you know, in that sign, because I think that's what is really interesting when you kind of look all different signs as a family unit, like what astrology signs, what are the same, like you and your kids both have the same moon signs, you know, but then you have different sun signs, and there's just, yeah, so many different dynamics. I think it's always interesting to kind of see like what are we teaching each other, right, as moms and as kids. And so those are the types of things that I'm talking about on there.
I love it. I love it so much. Well, this was an amazing conversation. I can't wait to get back in contact with you again, hopefully in the near future, to collaborate some more as far as just some really good conscious conversations or circles or anything that you want to do.
Yeah,
This was amazing. So thank you so much
realize
for
that
coming
too.
forward. And if anybody has any questions, like I said, I will drop Annie's information and my information in the comments below for the replay. Just let us know, or if you want to connect with either one of us to go further in depth with your healing with your family, we would love to connect with you guys. So I hope you all have an amazing rest of your week. Annie, thank you again. Looking forward to this. And yeah, we'll talk soon.